Right, next thing we're going on to is the Waggler. Now it's probably either my joint favourite method or very close second favourite method in the world ever, and that's fishing sort of traditional Waggler. I just love it. It takes me right back to my childhood when I had strawberry blonde flowing locks and everything. It's just a brilliant way of catching fish. So you saw what I was doing when I was on that long rod short. I was pinging out a few pellets of the Waggler line. Now I'm only been pinging them sort of like 20-22 metres or something. I don't want to sort of over exert myself and go right, ooh, James just snared, but ooh, great big one. I don't want to go right tight to the island or anything like that. I just want it nice and comfy where I can sort of ping that bait and keep it nice and accurate. I'm only putting sort of 4 or 5 pellets in at a time, not loads. Let me talk you through the setup. So, rod wise, for this sort of distance, I prefer to use a 12-foot rod. You get away with an 11-foot rod as well, but 12-foot, it just gives you that extra bit of advantage with the line pickup. Now I'm using our new Parabolics rods, the fantastic rods. It's got a lovely through action on them, so when you do get great big wobbly carp, it just don't look up at all. They're absolutely perfect. Right, so we'll start off at the bottom. Now what we've got is 0.20 on our reel. Again, notice I showed you before, when loading the reel, it's loaded right to the lip, so it's nice and smooth, so there's no friction coming off it. Now, Wagglers wise, which we'll get onto in a bit, I'm using a light Waggler, and incidentally that's why I'm using not so much a light main line, but I could go heavier, obviously the size of fish in here. The reason I'm sticking to 0.20 is it's the friction for your rod rings when you're casting out. If the line was too thick, I wouldn't be able to get the distance. Now, I want as least resistance as possible for these carp and these big F1s. If the carp, certainly in particular, feel any resistance whatsoever in your float setup, they're going to reject your bait. So that's why I'm fishing light. Not in line, but light float. So, 0.20 main line, come down to the hook length. Now, when I'm fishing for carp sort of through the water on the traditional sort of pellet Waggler style, I'd fish a longer hook length and a much thicker one. But when I will catch fish through the water today. Obviously the water's warm, it's nice and mild, and the fish are coming up in the water, they're swirling on my bait. But ultimately how I've got it plumbed up is I'm going to end up on the bottom, which is perfect for searching the whole water column. So I've got an 8-inch hook length. It's 8-inch of 0.18 Power Optex. Got a nice big hook on, again a nice 14s hook on, with the same size band that we had on for that long rod. And again, you know, if you pan in rich, you can see I've whipped it exactly the same, twisted up sort of 22 times, so that band can always stay at the top of the hook. So just your nice loop to loop. Notice I've got a bigger loop in the main line, just so it creates a bit of friction as it falls through the water. It just takes it down that little bit slower. Now shotting wise, I've got 3 number 9s on. If I was fishing sort of more traditional baits, or if it wasn't as windy, then I'd probably put 11s or even 10s on. But with a nice big heavy bait like a pellet, it just sits there nice and stable. So 3 number 9s spaced evenly apart. What's that, sort of 6-7 inches, something like that, just so it gives me some cushioning. Once that rigs in, it's going to stay nice and stable. Now coming up the float, it's roughly, I mean, I'll talk you through plumbing up in a sec how I do it, but we've got roughly what, 3.5 foot, something like that, and I'm fishing slightly over depth today with a wind on it. Again, we'll come to that in a sec. Now this is an important bit here, getting on that Rich. You can see I've got that gap in between the shots. Now the reason for that is when you're striking into the fish, you want that float to collapse on your line. Now let me show you what would happen if that wasn't the case. I'll just move one shot so I can show you. So when you get a bite, there's too much resistance there, so what happens, you're striking against the float first, whereas if you've got that gap in between it, you're straight into the fish. So the float collapses on your line, you're straight into the fish. It's very important. Excuse me. Now another important tip, I'll always use loaded floats. I'm not a big fan of using unloaded floats because I hate non-toxic shot. I want to be using lead shot. Now you can legally use lead up to size 8. Now these are number 9s around this, and I've got sort of 5 one side, 4 the other, just so it's nice and locking. That's not going to move anywhere. The other thing you'll see as well is I've got a float adapter on, so in an instant, if that wind gets up even stronger, I can change that float and go a little bit heavier and just add 1 or 2 more shots to it. Nice and easy. There's nothing complicated again with what we're doing. Float choice, there's loads of different varieties of float out there. Personally, I favour these Drennan inserts. I think they're fantastic, lovely and stable in the water, and they're nice and sensitive. Now, again, if I was fishing more sort of natural baits, maggots, casters, I'd really dot that float right down. But with having a nice big bait on, and I'm fishing slightly over depth, when the fish takes it, I want it to make sure it's on so that I'm going to sit the float to about there, so we've got roughly about an inch of bristles showing, which you might think, that's a lot, but trust me, when there's a bit of chop on it, and this, that and the other, the fish will take it. There's hardly any resistance whatsoever down the line, so you get them nice true positive bites. Now, I've been fishing for sort of like 15-20 minutes on it. I've had a couple of carp, but again, we're getting them F1s and skimmers, so we are getting the float. It'll be dancing around a bit. You'll see that in a sec. Let me just talk you through how I'd plumb up as well. Now, there's a couple of ways of plumbing up. The worst thing you can do is put a great big, traditional plummet on it. It's just making loads of commotion, going to scare all the fish. So you can either put like an AA or an SSG, squeeze that on your hook. But what I like to do is get the insert of these floats. Well, certainly the old style ones are sort of like the old style stomp flows that you'll have on your connectors. Now what you can do with that is just put the hook through the plastic lip, just loop that through, and then you can just close that up there, and that's how I plumb up with a Waggler. It's not intrusive, it's not scaring the fish whatsoever. You can just cast it in, feather it down, and then basically what I'm looking for is, once that's settled, if I don't see the float, then obviously I know that I'm off depth. What I'm looking for is to see the float, then I move it back down in sort of 2-inch intervals until I don't see the float, and then I know that basically the last 2 inches that I moved, I can put it up another 2 inches, and I'm going to be 2 inches over depth, another 2 inches, 4 inches over depth, and so on and so on. I've got this float roughly settled about sort of 4 inches over depth. The wind's calmed down a bit when I first plumbed it up. It was a right gale blowing, it blew all my hair out and everything, so that's why I'm fishing slightly over depth, so I'm going to get them nice positive bites. So that's the finished rig. Nothing complicated. As I say, what I've been doing, I've been pinging sort of 4 or 5 pellets in at a time, and I've been varying it. I've been feeding first, casting into it, which is your proper traditional style of pellet Waggler fishing, to get the fish as they're cruising in. The next noise you hear is your rig landing, and they tend to nail it. We've been getting fish on the bottom as well, so you can either get in position first and then fire bait round it, just to experiment with that on the day. So without further ado, let me go and show you how we're doing. Right then, let's get snarled up in these carp. So first thing I'm going to do is flip that rig out so that when I bring it back and get cast it in straight away. Bearing in mind I've just been fishing there, I'm quite likely to hook fish, but I'm not going to feed it again, so I'm going to take the attention away and concentrate on this one. So pellets in, and then what I'm looking to do is put that float, there we go. Now bearing in mind, you will get bites straight away like that, and he's wobbling back towards me. I'd imagine it'd be a carp, could be an F1. But so you saw that time, like pinging the pellets out and casting into it, then pellets would have been roughly about sort of half depth. It's just a fantastic way of fishing, because ultimately, any bait that gets through, you're going to end up on the bottom anyway. It is a brilliant way of fishing. That's why I love it so much. Now you see, when I'm playing the fish, I'm not going to go directly right high like I did in that long rod. I'm keeping everything nice and low. There's nothing there, nothing for the fish to aim at or anything like that. The lilies are all over the place, so over the other side. So I'm not worried about that. Just make sure, you see, when I'm winding down, I've got that healthy bend in my rod. What I don't want to do is sort of like wind down too fast and take all the pressure off that rod. I want to keep that pressure on all the time. I'm keeping it nice and low. As soon as I see that fish swirl, I'm going to go for the net. So you see it's coming up in the water, the lower I keep it. So I'm going to go for the net now. And this is where a long landing net comes in. Lift that rod high and then you're straight in. Oh, how was that then? First chuck. Beautiful. Right, let's have a look at them. So this has been sort of average stamper fish today, probably sort of 5 or 6 pounds. He's a bit lively, but I'll mend him round and show him, yeah? Let's just get the hook out again. Case in point, you saw, like I always use back lines, we've done before. As soon as I've got that fish in the net, everything's nice and tight. I'll put the anti-reverse back on, so I'm keeping everything nice and tight, so I'm not going to tangle. Now, let's get the hook out, and then we can show you if he behaves. Think he'll behave, Rich? What do you reckon? I don't know. He looks a bit lively to me. He's a nice, fully scaled mirror. Oh, he's going to jump. We've got a jumper. We've got a jumper. Can you get him, Rich? Can you get him? 3 jumps. Yes. So it's good 5 or 6 pound. Beautiful fish. We'll get him back, and then we'll just repeat the process. As I say, it's absolutely brilliant way of fishing. Now that one came, as I say, I pinged the pellets out first, and then pellets were probably about halfway through the water. That's when we got that bite. But just before that, just where I was talking all you lovely people through my setup, I was getting them instantly. As soon as you see him swirling that bait, I was getting them literally as soon as it hit the water. So let's just have another go on that. Bait up again. Look at me, I'm shaking, I'm that giddy, I can't wait to get in. Right, that's done. Let's see if there's another one there. So I'm only pinging sort of 3s and 4s in. Before, when I was fishing on the bottom, I was pinging sort of 6s and 8s in, but they're coming up in the water a bit now, so feather that in over there and let's see what happens. You see the beauty of fishing sort of like this style of fishing where you bait so, oh, you see that's getting down to the bottom now. There's still like skimmers and F1s down on the bottom, so you see that's just dragging a bit as well. That was a little dink then. It's just a brilliant way of fishing. You don't miss out on anything. Bring that bait in and get that float right over it. Perfect. Come on, you fishies. So you had a bit of an inquiry then, there's a fish swimming into it. Just going to sink that bit lower. There he goes. So you can see him just on the surface there, just to the left of my float. So I've pinged out, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back and I'm going to ping again, and then we're going to cast over it, see if we can snare another one. Not with that cast though. Not with that cast we won't. We'll with this one now. That's it, that's the one. So what's very important when you're waggler fishing is that you're sort of watching that float through the air, and just before it hits the water, oh, we got another one. I don't think it's a carp though. I think it's a skimmer, an F1. Yeah, what's very important is when you're watching that waggler through the air, you stop it just before it hits the bottom. Oh, he's fell off. How dare he? Fell off! Yeah, stop that float just before it hits the water, and then you're going to get, basically, your bait's going to be getting projected past your float, so it's going to fall on that nice tight line, which is perfect. So, that wind's getting up again, it'll make things difficult. But what I don't want to do is put a heavier waggler on to combat the wind, because I want to keep everything nice and light so that there's no resistance there. What can happen with fishing two heavier wagglers is the carp will pick up on the resistance and they'll just reject your hook bait. So fishing nice and light, a lot of the time the fish will hook themselves. So you see, we had that first carp that we had, that better one was on the drop, and then we've just had that little F1 that fell off, that was right on the bottom. So it just goes to prove the effectiveness of fishing like this, fishing through the water. We're just sort of like going up a little bit of a slope there. It's a really effective way of fishing. And there's another little bite. So again, them sort of skimmers and F1s are playing a big part today. And I'm convinced it's because we're on our own. Obviously wind's howling down here, there's a lot of fish down here. And that's why, you know, we're getting a few of them. But it's still catching fishes, it's what it's all about. Right there. Yes! They're proper coming on now, these fish. Whoa. One of the most important things as well, once you've hooked one, is to keep that bait going in. Just pinging it in. Again, I've got my match head on me. You know, you don't really have to sort of pleasure fishing, but match conditions, you've got to keep that bait going in. He's swimming quite quick, this one. Might be a big F1. Bit nice. A big F1. Oh no, it's a nice comment. Oh, we waddled him out. So as I said, this style of fishing will catch you some beautiful big fish. Look at that beauty comment. I'm going to show it you. I'm going to show it you again. I've got to show it you again. Another. They're all about a similar size, sort of like 5 or 6 pound. We waddled one in before, about 12, which I brought to you when Jamie were talking. He was a nice one, but look at this one. Beautiful common. Bit angry Rich again, bit angry. Whoa, quick Rich, quick. Yeah. Yeah. Right, let's get him back to fight another day. Oh, what a session. Yes.